This is our kickstand hinge with our body weight, either as a warm-up or more of a mobility drill here. So for the setup on this, we're going to make sure that we're in a staggered stance. I like to make sure my toes, my back toes are in line with my heel, and then I'm going to step my foot out so that I'm either hip or shoulder width apart. I want to make sure I'm not wider than shoulder width because then I'm going to have a tough time getting over this leg, and I want to make sure I'm not turning this into a balancing act by just making it a tightrope. So I want to make sure I'm hip to shoulder width apart. Foot contacts in the front foot, I want to make sure I'm feeling my whole foot on the ground the whole time. So I'm making sure I have contact with base of my big toe, base of my pinky toe, and my heel. As I go through the movement, I want to stay heavier on the center of my heel and my base of my big toe, but I'm not losing my pinky toe or rolling my foot in or out. So I'm making sure that the whole foot is suctioned to the floor the whole time. Back foot contacts, I'm just making sure I'm pressing through the ball of my foot, pressing through my big toe. So I'm really making sure I can feel the base of my big toe in contact with the floor here, almost as if I'm going to take a step forward so that I'm pressing through my big toe to keep my weight over my lead leg. And that way I make sure that I stay over the leg that I'm working, which is our front leg here. Now, pressure-wise, it will shift as you come out and up, but I want to make sure that I'm staying heavy in the middle of my foot. So I don't want to feel like I'm falling forward onto my toes, and I don't want to feel like I'm really, really into my heel either. So I want to make sure that I have pressure in the middle of my foot, ball of my foot, and my knee of the front leg is going to be soft and bent so that it's locked in over my laces or where my laces would be, and then I'm not going to move it from there. It's not going to be over my toes, it's not going to be directly over my heel, and it's certainly not going to be behind my heel here. So making sure it's locked over my laces, and then my back leg is just going to be soft as I initiate the hinge. So with my hands, I like to take my same side hand, place it on my glute, opposite hand, place it in the hip, and then one way I like to think about initiating this is I'm going to make sure I find my core. So you can give yourself an exhale, feel the ribs connect with the pelvis, make sure you're staying long in the spine, so you can almost imagine lifting your rib cage up off your pelvis, and then head comes up and back, so we don't want to lose our heads or feel like it's falling off as we come down. And then one way to initiate, I think of pressing and pushing my hip back into my hand, and I want to feel my glute grow in this hand. If my glute doesn't grow and it stays tucked under and I'm too rounded, you see how it tucks under here, it doesn't look as big as if I give it a nice big poke and I search for as much stretch in my glute as possible, and it feels really big in my hand. And then to come up, I'm going to press through the middle of my foot like I'm pressing on a gas pedal, and then come up over that front foot. Another way I like to think about it is if you think about your tailbone or your sits bones, they are kind of pointing down right now, and you're going to initiate by just trying to tip those sits bones and tailbones up towards the ceiling as your chest comes down. Again, still maintaining rib cage long and lifted off the pelvis, head, neck is engaged, and then pressing up over that. Again, if your glutes don't grow in your hand and you're just too tucked under, we need to find more length, more poke of the glutes, and get nice and long. And then we want to make sure our core stays engaged and we're not just dumping in and arching the back without that core engagement. So make sure you set that core with your breath first, and then just maintain this rib cage to pelvis positioning the whole way through. From the front side or a back view, we want to make sure that our hips are either staying level with each other or slightly turned in towards that lead leg. We want to make sure that we're not just kicking out of our hip and turning away from the leg that we're trying to work here. So we are requiring our hips to go into, our lead hip to go into some sort of internal rotation, If we end up trying to avoid that, or we know we're limited, we might be tempted to turn away from that. We want to make sure that we don't do that. So either as you go down, making sure that the bony parts of the fronts of your hips stay level and facing the ground, or even a slight turn towards that lead leg. To do that with the turn, I like to think of this leg needs to stay soft. So as I come down, this back knee actually kind of stays soft and drops towards the ground to let this opposite hip or back hip turn in to my front hip, just ever so slightly. And this is coming from the hips, not from twisting at the upper body. And then I know that I'm really not staying square or turning into my hip if I catch this leg wanting to lock out or kick out to the side. So I'm letting this hip stay soft, and if anything, it comes in and down a little bit. And I'm staying over this front foot as I do that. Another thing that I want to make sure throughout this movement is that my knee stays locked in place. So as I go down into it, my knee still stays over my shoelaces, and then as I come up, my knee also still stays over my shoelaces. So at no point am I ever locking out my knee throughout the movement at all. I'm making sure it stays bent, but I'm also not bending it too far. And then very last here is breathing. One way that I really like to do it, especially without weight, when we're doing it in this context, is to exhale to come down, inhale into this glute space that you just created, and then exhale to come up, and then you'll reset with an inhale at the top, and then repeat that. Another thing that I like to program and to do is to just breathe for a couple breaths at the bottom. So I will exhale to come down, and then I'll take 3 to 5 breaths here, trying to inhale into all of this space, really teach my body that it's safe to be here, my hip that it's safe to be internally rotated, and then exhale to come up. We really want to own this bottom position, the most challenging part of it. When our brains and our bodies want to kick us out of that hip, we want to own and breathe into that position and really make sure that that solidifies, so that that internal rotation or that ability to get into the hip is there when we need it, especially with faster movements. So what a couple reps from the side look like, and then I'll show a couple reps from the front, look like this. One more here from the front. Those from the side. Now, a couple reps from the front. Last thing I really want to reiterate is this stance that we started in. So we're making sure that that big toe is in line with that heel. I don't want to be parallel with my other foot and too far forward. And I definitely don't want to be in a lunge, because I want to be able to stay over this lead leg. I want at least 60, probably more like 80% of the weight in this front leg, and then only like 20, maybe 40% in the back leg, just enough to feel my big toe continuously pushing me to make sure I stay over my lead leg, because the lead leg is our focus here. And that's how we're going to do this kickstand hinge variation.